I'd like to welcome you here to this devotional, this weekly devotional. I began thinking today, and I have a great deal of the time I have these thoughts in my mind of looking and enjoying, thinking about the past, thinking about the home that I I left as I got out of high school or a little further out. And there's always that situation that comes to me, sometimes in a great emotional type situation that draws me back to home. And often we have these thoughts as of some kind. We want to go back to where we were. It seems as though all of those things could be enjoyed, those things that were so great when we were there. Oftentimes we forget the difficulties that were there also, and the situations that moved us from there to where we went in our life. But Satan uses those things to draw us away from God, to look at those things that we think were so great and so grand. We want those things back. For whatever reason, we fail to see the difficulties that were with those situations also. But I want us to think this morning or today in Hebrews, the 11th chapter. And we as Christians need to think about this situation being God's children. What are we looking toward? What are we really wanting out of our life? Or what should we be wanting out of our life? In Hebrews, the 11th chapter, they are talking of all of these who died in faith, those who sought to do God's work, those who sought to live their life for Him. And he comes down to a point in verse 13 of chapter 11. He says, "These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them, and greeted them from afar, having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on earth." They belong to God. For people who speak thus make it clear that they're seeking a homeland. They're seeking something that is greater, their homeland. See, so often we forget. We spend our time thinking about home and back there and all the good things there. We might even compare them to the life we had before we become a child of God. We see the good things. And they want to draw us back. Satan seeks for them to draw us back. But you see, he said saw themselves, they were strangers and exiles on earth. That was not their real home. He said, for people who speak thus make it clear that they were seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. You see, I think sometimes we think too much on what was behind us. You remember Paul said, leaving that which is behind me behind me. Don't go back. Don't go looking back at that. And it's not saying you can't move back home in our physical sense. It's the idea that so often Satan uses these type of things to draw us away from God, to remove us from God. He said we need to be thinking differently. He said if these people had been thinking about that land from which they came, they would have had opportunity to return. In other words, the opportunity would have opened up to them. They would have made it open up. So many times people began looking at the life they had before Christ. And they began thinking, well, I had so much enjoyment then. I had so much fun. I had so much that I could go do that I can't do now. They forget the bad things that happened in the fun they had. So often we forget the sin in which we were living. I want us to hear what he continues with. He said, but as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, as he prepared for them a city. But you see, their desire was not to go back into the old ways. Their desire was a better country, a better place, a longing for a home that they knew had been given to them. They strove to enter into that home, seeking continually. We need to change our desires a lot of times and seek that which God has set before us. In chapter 12, this is given to the Christian, to that one who is a child of God. We need to think about these things, for these are the things that will push us to live, to strive toward this home. Chapter 12, verse 1, he says, "Since therefore we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses." We know, we read about these people, we see them, we know the truths behind them because they're from God, what they received, that they live for God alongside great difficulties. They set those things that were in their past behind them, they set them aside. He says, "Since therefore we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us run with endurance the race." Wrong. Let us also lay aside every weight and sin that clings so closely to us. Let us set them aside. Let us get rid of the baggage. He said, and run the race, or run with endurance the race that is set before us. Throw those old things away and seek to follow God. Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising shame, and to sit at the right hand of the throne of God. We're to seek that place with God. And if we will seek with all of our heart, soul, and mind to live our life for God, to seek Him, we have that home in heaven with Him. But we must not dwell on the things of the past. And we must look to that which He's promised us, seeking, knowing that it is ours, and living toward that point. So often it is so easy for us to try to go back, to try to find what we think are all the good things that we had and lived through without questioning, why did we leave? We left because that life was full of sin, and Christ offered us salvation. We need to remember those things. We need to genuinely look and say, I'm looking for a home that's a better place, a home in heaven, and continue in that manner instead of looking back over our shoulder and see the things that we think we're missing. Seeking and striving to follow God, not man, not my own heart, but follow what Christ followed. I want to thank you for being here. I hope that you look at these things and you see the necessity to look and say, hey, those things that were before, they're not really of any importance to me anymore. It's what lies ahead of me that's important. I want to thank you for being here, and may God bless.